Norfolk Advisory Committee for the day of March 5th to order. First order of business to do a roll call. Attendance, votes. Kevin Calcutt.
Here.
Melissa Sear.
Here.
Joyce Theriault.
Present.
Rob Garrity.
Here.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Here.
Ken Fitzgerald.
Here.
Thais Hickman.
Here.
All right. David Lutz is here as well. We have a very short agenda tonight, and we're going to hear from Blair on a specific article. If you feel that you can also talk about the two street acceptance articles, if it's there, or the planning board will do that when they come in. But why don't you come sit down?
I hate to steal their thunder.
Justin's going to give us a broader overview of the warrant than he did last week, and some budget figures. We had scheduled to have Carol in tonight. However, the fees article that was on the warrant has been pulled, and the other article is relative to kennels, and I talked to her about that today, and I didn't necessarily think it was valuable for her to come. She can come at a later time, or I can talk about them. It's pulling our bylaw into compliance with a recently passed state law. So our first order of business is, I don't have what article is this?
27.
Article 27, which makes amendments to our shade tree bylaw. And we have Tree Warden of the Year, Blair Crane, also serves as our Commissioner of the DPW, or Director of the DPW. Go ahead.
Good evening. So knowing that everybody does not know everything, all things tree warden, I think I'll kind of start from the beginning, which may drag this out a little bit, but there are a number of statutes that kind of bring the tree warden position itself together, starting, as I had alluded to earlier. Chapter 87 was a statute that was passed in 1899. Life has certainly changed a little bit since 1899 with regards to requirements, life in general, and fine structures and so on. So that was the beginning of all of this. I also want to kind of point out that MGL Chapter 41-106 is what gives the tree warden essentially the term of office and how that comes about with the select board. And then the Acts of 2004, Chapter 101, when the Department of Public Works was created, also includes the office of the tree warden. So the Director of Public Works becomes the tree warden once the qualifications are met to be a tree warden. So all of those things together kind of bring that office to what it is. That being said, this proposed bylaw puts a lot of those things together and brings them more in tune with where we are in 2025. Included with that, obviously, are definitions. Definitions of certain items have changed over the years. One instance of that being the definition of a public nuisance plant, things that were not really considered over 100 years ago. With that, as I go down through the proposal itself, the bylaw itself, some of it is the same as it would be in Chapter 87 and other places that you find. This mimics that in a lot of ways and just brings it together. But there are some new pieces in here as you get deeper into it. Section 7, planting of trees and shrubs, has a reference to the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals. I've reached out to both of those. I heard back from the town planner today with a couple of questions regarding how this would affect the scenic road bylaw. And I also heard from the Zoning Board of Appeals chair, and he was in agreement with it and had no issues. I did want to reach out to them, obviously, because it does mention them in here, and there is a requirement to work with the tree warden when it comes to trees and plants. Going on beyond that, obviously there's verbiage in here about prohibited acts, obstructions, one of which I'd like to point out is a requirement about the height that trees can be over a roadway and trees can be over a sidewalk, but those are things that are not mentioned anywhere in the state statutes. They weren't really, it wasn't really a problem in 1899. If, a branch hit a buggy, I suppose that might be a thing, but in this day and age, I felt that those were things that should be addressed. Not that we really have much of an issue with it, but it does
Oh, I beg to differ.
give it some clarity anyway. Beyond that, damage of public trees has been a hot topic throughout municipalities in the Commonwealth. Damage to public trees, whether by automobile accident, intentional damage to public trees. There are a variety of reasons. So I thought that should be spelled out there. And then in Section 11, I went through the requirements and penalties. As we were alluding to before, $20 for a fine really doesn't speak well 120 years after the initial law was enacted. So that does create fines and penalties for offenses for our public shade trees. I've been really looking at this now for about a year and a half. It's gone to town council for them to vet. They had some opinions with that, which have been integrated into this. On top of that, I've reached out to over 50 different tree wardens throughout the state to discuss, what they do. What are things in their bylaws? Because tree bylaws are a fairly common practice in the state of Massachusetts. So we really wanted to look and see, were there pieces of bylaws that they had issues with, that they enacted and didn't work well, things that they thought were, really, really good for their communities. And that was everywhere from communities out in the Berkshires, Northampton, and out that way, all the way into Boston, Malden, Swampscott, and so on. So a pretty wide variety of different tree wardens to see, what worked, what didn't work, and the reasons why that was the case. Furthermore, one of the drivers of this is that for the past year or so, I have been working to get Norfolk certified as a Tree City USA, which is a designation from the National Arbor Day Association. One of the criteria to become a Tree City USA is that you have to, there's 4 criteria really. You have to have an Arbor Day celebration. You have to have, I got it right here somewhere, buried in all of this. There we go. So you have to have a tree committee or forestry department, having a tree warden, de facto tree warden, and a tree department within the DPW meets that statutory requirement. You have to have you have to spend $2 per capita of your population toward tree care, which we already do within our DPW budget. Norfolk actually spends $3.75 per capita. Arbor Day celebration and proclamation, the Select Board has issued a proclamation already, so the very last and final piece of to become a Tree City USA program is for us to enact a shade tree bylaw. So that was a final piece of that puzzle and one of the drivers of this project. And that's all I have.
So my first question is what's on the books now? Anything?
Other than a scenic road bylaw, no.
So the follow-up question is, how did you win Tree Warden of the Year if we didn't have a bylaw for you to follow?
There's 300.
I'm not being fresh.
There
I'm
are
actually
351 tree wardens in the state of Massachusetts. Last year's Tree Warden of the Year was in Malden, and I don't know, I guess if you're a nice guy, nice things happen to you.
And the tree warden position is created in state law.
Correct.
And is it in state law that it's also assigned to the DPW commissioner?
No.
Or- okay.
There are communities where it actually, believe it or not, it's an elected position.
And do you have the capacity to designate someone, or does your successor in the role have the ability to designate someone rather than you, or the select board have to do that?
Chapter 87 states that the tree warden has the authority to enact deputy tree wardens.
Okay.
And that's also in here.
But let's pretend that your successor doesn't want to be the tree warden. It would have to be the select board who would pick
Correct.
your deputy or whatever it might
Correct.
be. Okay. What are the certifications you have to get?
I've been through Mass Tree Warden certification through the Mass Tree Wardens Enforcers Association, which was a 3-month course in order to do that. And that's, for the most part, that's it. I have a history in forestry to begin with,
Oh,
so
okay.
so I have experience in that realm, but that was certainly useful in order to pass the course.
And I have one more question before I open it up, but Section 7, you said, gives you authority to regulate planting of shrubs and
Yes.
trees on public property. Does that include the public way
Yes.
that is in my front yard and everyone else's front yard?
Within the right-of-way of the roadway.
Okay.
So
Is that defined somewhere else? Because it just says public property, and technically it's private property with a public easement on it.
yeah, I guess,
I mean,
council
we might
vetted
be,
that, so
yeah.
I didn't
Okay.
give it a second look.
That's why I asked, because,
Right.
so I'm redoing my front lawn. Theoretically, if I decided to put a tree down near the road, I would have to go to you to get approval for that.
Correct. So I've had issues in the past with right-of-ways, not necessarily with trees, but in the past I had a farmer that had a fence within the right-of-way, and every
Right.
year we would plow snow and wipe out his fence. And he would expect the town to come and fix it every year. And I said to him, well, your fence is within the right-of-way, so it shouldn't be there in the first place. And I'm okay with it being there, but if it gets wiped out, it's at your risk.
Right.
And so I said, your option here is that you can move it out of the right-of-way, and if we then damage it, we will certainly replace it. But if you continue to want to put it up against the road, if snow actually hits it and wipes it out, then that's on you, and you take that liability. And in the end, he did end up moving it because he didn't want the cost of having to repair it all the time. But
Does anyone else have any questions?
I do. Oh, go ahead.
Kevin first, or Joyce first?
Quick question. Where did the language come from regarding, what am I looking at? I'm looking at section 8 and 9, where it appears there's more language about trees and branches on private land and harming,
so this deals with,
Public folks.
right, so this deals with risk, right? So a tree and a branch is never a hazard, because the only way to mitigate a hazard is to remove it.
right.
So every tree is considered a risk. Some are low risk, right? If you have a tree A and it's in the middle of the forest and it falls over, that's a low-risk tree. There's really no damage other than the tree falling over. If you take that same tree and put it over a playground or next to somebody's property and it falls and hits a school bus, that's a high risk or an imminent risk tree, right? The exact same tree. Every tree can fall under a given set of circumstances.
Okay, so I'm going to narrow it down for you. So,
I was getting there.
because I get it. I deal with risk at work all the time. I got that down pat. So there's a tree, may be damaged or rotten or whatever, hard to tell, falls into the street because it's closer to the road. Whose responsibility is it? Whose liability is it if the tree is damaged? The homeowner hasn't done anything with it because they're not an arborist.
Correct.
Falls over in a bad storm, someone sees it, oh my God, this is really bad because it broke in half and it's rotten to the core.
So trees that are not on public property or within the right-of-way are the responsibility of the landowner. Now, if that tree is based on private property and falls into the public way, it's still on the landowner. Now, the town or the municipality will come out and clean that up to the edge of the right-of-way, but they're not responsible for anything beyond the right-of-way. So if that tree falls
if-
over, you
yep.
snip it off.
And the school bus gets hit, school bus is damaged.
Correct.
School bus owner is going to sue or go after the insurance of the private homeowner
Correct.
who does not have a degree in tree study.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I get a clarifying question? Were you talking about trees that are only in the right-of-way, or were you talking about any tree on?
Private land.
All, like,
On
30 feet
private
off the
property.
road that happens to be a
Correct.
45-foot tree? Okay.
Yep.
Follow up on that, though. I think that would be the case, though, even without this bylaw.
Correct.
The tree falls from your front yard, lands in the street, hits a car. Whether this bylaw is there or not, I think the same course of action is what ultimately happens.
Just making sure that the question is asked and answered for those that might be watching.
Yeah, this really, the only spot in here that really pertains to anything private is if there is a private tree where a branch or something of that nature is below 8 feet over the sidewalk and needs to be cut. At that point, it needs to be taken care of, or if it's deemed to be a public hazard. So if we go out and we realize that, hey, this tree hasn't had a leaf on it in 3 years, and it's a real problem, then at that point, we can go to the landowner and say, this is an imminent risk tree, this could fall over tomorrow. This is a problem that needs to be addressed, the landowner needs to take care of that.
So it's not, may I?
Yep.
So it's not something that if you're coming and telling the landowner about their tree, they couldn't say, well, can you cut it for us and bill us?
Right, no,
It's their
that's their
responsibility. They have to go out
Absolutely.
and contract.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, this bylaw doesn't affect from a monetary standpoint anything with the town. There's no budgetary impact with this.
Okay.
If my private tree falls on the road and you clean it up, are you gonna bill me?
No,
Okay.
only because we have a duty to keep the road open
Fine.
for safety
Safe.
reasons.
But they're only going to clean it up to the edge of the right.
Right, no, I understand that,
Exactly, and
but
we've
that's
had that
fine.
issue. We had that issue on Boardman. Tree went across, literally came out of a guy's yard, went across the road, and the top of it was in the guy's yard across the road. We
Guy
went down,
across the
snipped
road
both
wanted you to
sides,
clean the whole thing.
cleaned it up because we can't go on private property.
And sometimes some sticks might end up on your front yard that, maybe we're in the road
Right.
first and kind of get tossed over there.
Try to do what you can, but you can't go rip stumps out of and, do that sort of stuff in private property, so.
Kevin, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have two questions. So the first one is really just kind of going to summarize everything you guys just talked about, right? I know that one of the most contentious aspects of the tree warden role is kind of distinguishing what's the responsibility of the town versus the private owner. And just to clarify and bring all that together, none of this changes the town's position on that, right? Anything that we're proposing right now is still standard operating procedure. Perfect. The second one was about the Tree City designation. What comes along with that and meeting all these designations?
Grants.
Yep.
That's a big one from the U.S. Forest Service. That's, the National Arbor Day Foundation is a very large organization nationwide. Roughly, there's about, I think she told me today, I was in contact with DCR today, there's about 90 communities in Massachusetts already that are tree cities, about 3,500 nationwide. So obviously you have to jump through some hoops to get there, but most of the tree cities that I've talked to already have had really favorable results. If I go to DCR for a grant, let's say I go for a $10,000 grant to do a tree inventory in town here, part of their criteria when they're judging my grant against other people is I get an automatic boost for being a Tree City USA.
Yeah, okay.
So, it gives you a greater edge.
And I think that's important for people to know too. So it's not all this work just to get an acrylic leaf downstairs in the trophy case. There's money that comes along with it. So thank you.
And signs.
And signs, yes.
And go right next to the green community signs that we got 10 years ago and never put up. Oops, did I say that out loud?
I have a follow-up question.
Rob, do you have a question still? Rob?
I got a really pedantic question, so.
Oh, so he'll go last.
Just a follow-up on Kevin's question. I was going to ask the same thing about, what are the benefits to becoming a tree city, but are there any, criteria for the number of trees that you have to have in a certain town in order to qualify or anything like that? Or is it just those three things that you mentioned?
They don't, because different towns and cities, even in Massachusetts, are so diverse, like, when I talk to other tree wardens, a good friend of mine is the tree warden in Malden, right? He has a very different set of issues than we have, right? My biggest issue is when the wind changes, half the power in town goes out, where his issue is the fact that he lives in a concrete jungle and he's trying to find little patches to put trees and to try to create some kind of canopy. So they don't really tell you how to go about creating an urban canopy. They want to know more about how proactive you are. You know, they're very interested in the 500 or so tree seedlings that we've given out over the last couple of years, community outreach. So there's a lot of pieces of, you know, Arbor Day celebrations and so on. So they want to just know more that you're engaging with the community and that you're protecting the canopy that you have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rob?
Yeah, so from a drafting standpoint, Section 10, which deals with prohibited acts, damage to public trees, so 10A. It's interesting, you've got 5, you know, clauses there. In 3 of them, you just say trees, and 2 of them, you say public trees. It should probably be consistent to say, even though I know, you know, 10A says damage to public trees, if you didn't put in public trees in clauses like 3 and 5, maybe I can make the argument that in 4, I really want to I do want to regulate activity with private trees. So I just, you know, as a pendant,
So everywhere that it says tree, your suggestion is to say public tree.
if you mean public tree, say public tree.
I actually think someone should take a look at the thing I raised regarding trees on public property too, because it's not public. You have an easement on my yard, but I own the yard.
Is that true?
Yes.
I'm not sure that's true.
You own,
It depends on whether or not.
Depends on where it is.
Whether it's taken,
right,
whether there's a right-of-way, right, an easement or a taken.
right. So some of them, in some cases, yes, and in some cases, no.
They've got a
And in our
property
town,
interest either way.
it varies from street to street, is what I've learned. And
Every single time a resident calls me with a tree. So the tree is always on public property when they want it taken down.
and it's always
It's always
there.
on private property when they want to save it, right? Usually in the spring, it's theirs, and in the fall, when all the leaves are falling off and they rake them all, it's definitely a public tree that's dying.
I got one in the backyard.
So, but again, every time that I get a call from a resident, I have to pull up the maps and
Right.
kind of dig to see, you know, the old plans, exactly where it is. And sometimes I actually have to go out with a tape measure and tape it off. If a tree is deemed, even if I can, you know, make a case for the roots being within the right-of-way, then it's deemed to be a public tree.
Right.
So it's, you know, that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So you can take down that tree. No, I was just kidding.
So, you know, it's, again, it's to try to protect as.
No, I
many as you
understand.
can, and,
Yeah, I understand. Easements is something I spent more time thinking about.
And in the past 20 years, litigation regarding trees has significantly jumped. And so. And
Nationwide or in Norfolk?
Nationwide.
Okay.
Nationwide. Nothing here, but nationwide, in Massachusetts, it's been a pretty hot topic.
Right, okay.
Just because a lot of these laws are pretty vague. And so, you know, again, Rob and I were talking about measuring the height of a tree. You know, it was always chest height. Well, chest height is, depending on who is taking the measurement, could be off 2 feet
Right.
in either direction. And those are things that have been litigated in court.
Right.
As to, you know,
Interesting.
when you're trying to look at a tree and decide whether or not it has a rotten cavity. You know, whether that's 3 feet off the ground, 5 feet off the ground, chest height.
Right.
You know, so a lot of those things have been issues over time.
Jonathan? You got a question?
I do. Section 8,
Section 8, yes, sir.
removal of trees and stumps. There's a couple of different subcategories here. A tree could be dangerous or obstructive, or it could be healthy, right? And the language for both. Trying to understand, where does Eversource fit in here?
Eversource has get out of jail free card. So every year, Eversource's chief arborist sends me a plan of all tree work that they plan to do within the town of Norfolk. Because they're a utility,
Yep.
they're required by statute to do that. They present me with a full multi-page plan of every place and every tree and all the work that they plan to do for the next 12 months. And then I meet with that arborist to concur or not concur with whether or not I believe that needs to happen. But for all intents and purposes, they have an exemption by state statute, and it's a totally separate piece.
Understood. So they have an exemption to prune or remove trees independently of what we have.
Correct.
Is there any town level control over any methods by which they do it. So if they, let's just say, cut a tree in half, not the long way, but I wouldn't put that past them either, but they just, and then leave this, I won't call it a stump, but like a
Totem pole, we call it.
totem pole to be
Yes.
there,
Yep.
such that Eversource no longer deems that to be a problem for the power lines, but it then becomes a problem per your language here, where it's no longer a healthy tree and now needs to be removed. Is that at the cost of the
So
the
what-
homeowner?
Right. So what we do is, that's part of that meeting. So when they come out and tell me that they want to take down all these trees, that's usually where the conversation comes in, because they want to do as minimal as possible. If it's, within 15 feet of the wire, they chop it. They don't really care what it looks like when they walk out of here. We just did a bunch of work on Campbell Street, where I said to them, listen, I would rather take it down and plant a new tree than I would be to leave a 10-foot totem pole here that may or may not ever grow again. Like that you're chopping 3/4 of the tree, what's the point? That costs them a little extra money, and they do appease me when I bring up those items to them, and they've actually done a lot more work in Norfolk than they ever used to. Hence the reason that over the past couple of years, we've had a lot less electrical outlet. It used to be that the wind changed direction and Noon Hill was out of power. But that has changed
And Holbrook and
drastically
Pondview as
over the
well.
last couple of years, and that's due to them. They've worked with us and saved the town a lot of money.
Okay, so just to net that out.
Yeah.
None of this applies to what Eversource chooses to do or not do.
Correct.
However, the results of what we are left with from what Eversource does or does not do is now subject to this bylaw.
Yes, once you have a stump.
Right, so what could, and not to be overly pedantic about this, I know we can't control what Eversource can do.
Right.
But they could take a healthy tree, turn it in, and for, yes, we all like electricity, but they could take a healthy tree, turn it into an unhealthy tree that then becomes the homeowner's burden to address.
No, because the power lines are all within the right-of-way, and they're only worried about trees that are affecting their utilities. So they're not cutting anything down without the owner's permission on private property. Everything they're
So
doing
a
is
tree
within the
that's
right-of-way.
in the right-of-way
Yes.
Which is still under.
is entirely town's responsibility, not the homeowner's responsibility.
Correct.
Okay.
And they have been very good. I mean, that last year alone, they gave us 8 10-foot trees that we planted. Just happened last year, we planted them in the cemetery. But they've been very good about donating trees back to us to help mitigate some of those.
Okay.
Are those trees that they've pulled from somewhere, or are they?
Just some.
Oh, wow.
And they're not expensive. A 8 to 10-foot tree is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $700, depending on the species.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was totally free to the town, so.
Interestingly enough, Eversource has more authority than the MBTA does.
Yes, they do.
The MBTA does not have the same get out of jail free card. They got to go through all
Well,
the rigmarole.
it's because the MBTA used to spray 15 or 20 feet of chemicals rather than cut stuff. That's why they had their authority taken away from them. Sorry, Rob.
Because, trees wreck trains, but that's okay, Dave.
Yeah, and chemicals
I
kill.
used to work for environmental affairs, I used to work for transportation.
And never mind. We'll take it outside later. Anyone else have any questions for Blair? No. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That was great. Thanks.
Hey, thank you. Good to see you.
As I mentioned earlier, Carol isn't coming tonight. If you want me to go through the kennel bylaw changes, I can. Or it's going to be me or Justin at some point, so we can either do it now or we can do it another night. It's pretty straightforward. They're just it's Article 28. The primary change is that Carl had to change the way she worded what triggers personal kennels, which is more than 4 dogs. She had it as 5 or more. Apparently that didn't meet the state code, so she changed it to more than 4 dogs with a limit of 10 dogs. This mostly affects personal kennels as opposed to commercial kennels, which we regulated prior. The second, and I think more critical change here, is that commercial kennels personal kennels now, to get licensed, they didn't used to have the animal control officer do an inspection, and now they will have to. Commercial kennels always had that. She just clarified it here.
I see that.
So it brings us into compliance with this law called Ollie's Law, which was passed in the wake of a animal-on-animal crime at a kennel where a dog died because he was attacked in the kennel. So we have 1 commercial kennel license and 3 private kennel licenses in the town. Carol thinks that this will help a little bit with potentially commercial kennels, because like a doggy daycare facility is considered a commercial kennel. So this makes that clear how that would operate a little bit better. So that's it on that. If we have any questions, we can ask her to appear at a later date or move on.
I don't know if it requires her coming here or not, but I would just like to know if she feels that this would adversely affect anybody that was currently operating underneath the 5-dog limit that would now be subjected to having to get a license for 4.
They don't have, no, it's more than 4. So it is still 5, but they wanted the
So
language to be.
Push it down 1 more dog.
No, it doesn't.
Is anybody going to be adversely affected by us reducing it from more than 5 to more than 4?
No, it was 4 or more. The current law says, 5 or more, which is 5 or more. So 5 is the limit. This just makes it clear for the purposes of some lawyer.
I see. Just
So
4 or more. Got it. Okay.
If you've got 4 dogs, you will not now or in the future be required to get a personal kennel
It went
license.
from 5 or more to
No.
more than 4.
More than 4.
Yep, got it now.
Yes.
And there's a limit of 10.
There's a limit of 10 for personal kennels, yes.
Talking about being
Or less than 11.
Or less than 11. Well said.
So
Or somewhere between 9 and 12.
I have
Yeah.
a question. So a person has 3 dogs. That's fine. One of the dogs has 11 puppies.
I don't know the answer to that question. We can check with Carol.
That's a lot of puppies.
It's a valid question.
But it's,
Yeah.
if they have 4 puppies, it's still over 5, so.
It does say in section A there that an owner or keeper of a dog 6 months of age or older.
Oh,
Temporary.
Oh, 6 months. Okay, so at that point, the puppies, hopefully, they would have sold them off
yes.
or given them away. Okay.
I'll clarify that with her.
Where did I miss that, Kevin?
Article 28, section
Yep.
A. First sentence.
There you go.
Got it. Yep, thank you.
Rob?
I have a question about Article 29.
Which is what?
That's the Board of Selectmen article about the conduct of town meeting.
We're not going to talk about that tonight.
Are they coming in?
I think he's expecting to deal with it, not the board. We can ask the board to
Is this your idea?
primarily.
Combination. Are you asking about the motion?
No, he's asking.
I'm asking about the motion piece.
Then that's Jay.
That's not on the agenda. That's not on the agenda for tonight, but we will talk about it.
Okay, we're going to talk with somebody who's going to be responsible for saying why they thought this was a great
Yes.
idea.
Yeah.
Dramatically changing the conduct of town meeting
You're looking at it over there.
I'll be here.
and neutering the power of the advisory board.
No. Advisory will still give its recommendation under this. It'll still be in the warrant.
So
And typical
we'll talk about this at a future date. Thank you, Rob. Justin is actually here to run through the budget presentation. We were talking earlier about whether he wants us to go through this page by page. I think we have it in hand, either physically in hand or in our electronic hands. I would be happy with an overview of what's in here unless people feel they want them. We can go through it and ask questions. Justin will be back with us several times over the next month as we dig deeper in this stuff and we start getting into specific department discussions. This kind of stuff will be as relevant then as it is now. But, is everyone okay with a sort of an overview of this?
Yes.
And the
Okay, cool.
video's up on for the select board videos. Now up on NTTV. I think Andrew has that.
Great.
All right, want to run through? So the first couple of slides, I'll probably just skip over. They're just highlighting what our revenue looks like, what state aid looks like at the moment. We always, when we're doing our budget, I know everyone knows, but I'll just read it. When we do state aid, we account for the governor's numbers when we incorporate that in our budget. Usually the legislature makes adjustments, and then we allocate those funds at the fall special town meeting. The fourth slide just highlights our revenue adjustments for the year. So we increased local receipts by 5.64%, and those are the various changes in our local receipts that we did to raise the additional revenue. So part of our revenue highlights, we highlighted that any times that we change local receipts, and, we've been a little bit more aggressive taking that up, it does affect our free cash. So we try to be conservative. We generally look at, a 3-year rolling average and take about 80 to 90% of those averages. And that's common, well-known DLS, DOR recommended practices. Also noted that new growth in fiscal year '25, we initially had budgeted $650,000. It came in a little bit lower, $575,000. So we brought down our new growth number to $600,000 because we still have seen pretty strong building permits, although Bob told us he's seen a little less activity, but it's still pretty strong. So we use $600,000 for new growth. I'm going to skip over number 6 because that's where we're at the moment. I did forward along our summary budget sheets for you guys too, just to see what the budget looks like. And I just gave you a portion of that tonight, but you do have the full version of it that I sent electronically to Erica last night, so you can dive into that. I want to just highlight the budget drivers, or major budget drivers, in the summary packet that you guys have. And I said this the last time I met with advisory. We have about $1.2 million in new revenue for fiscal year '26 in comparison to fiscal year '25. And I just highlight for education, it's $1.3 million in expenses. So that already shows you the difficulty we have with our budget. And moving forward, that's going to be a major issue. We break out the various things here: Norfolk County retirement, medical insurance, and public safety costs. The other thing that I highlight, the 18.1% increase in Tri-County, that's accounting for new students there. We have about 10 new students going there. It does not account for the Tri-County school building project, and that's $405,000 in addition to for us to figure out how to pay for that.
Can I get from someone how many Tri-County students in total we have? This is 10 additional students, right?
Yep. Yeah, we can.
Thank you.
It's 4004, right?
Yeah.
So it's 50 now?
Yeah.
I would assume it's 50, but we can get the exact figure. Probably get that from Dan.
The
Okay.
Aggie's the same thing, right?
It's based on students and how many students we get. Aggie, I think, came down.
No, it's up a little bit, tiny little bit.
I'll take a look at that one. I think it's a small amount. I think they adjusted on theirs. They charged a higher fee for special education. So I looked at the back end, so we can follow up and give you exact figures.
Thank you.
The next slide is a slide that, I wanted Ingrid to just give us an update about where Norfolk Public Schools was at. I will run through this slide. So the budget subcommittee and the superintendent are obviously working on their fiscal year '26 budget. As of yesterday, they were at 4.59%, but they're working to reduce it further potentially. And their current proposal, although I don't know what the positions are or any restructuring, reduces 5 positions, restructures some others. She indicated they may potentially request to use the special education stabilization funds that we used last year. Last year, we used $125,000. They are considering requesting to use $50,000. That does require the school committee and select board to vote in approval of utilizing those funds. They're going to host their budget hearing on March 11th, and our budget's an increase of 4% for them. And then I just point out that our practice lately has been, and the board is pretty committed to it, any additional Chapter 70 aid that we get based on the legislative process, we do allocate that to them, and we do that at a fall special town meeting. And Ingrid did want to be clear that, if you account for the one-time sources of funds that they use, because they used some of their discretionary funds in some of their funds account, and they use the special education stabilization funds, this is not necessarily 4%, it's 2.6% if you're accounting for the one-time sources of funds.
The only problem with that is that it's 4% next year.
Yep. She asked for it to be included. I put it in there. I'll let Ingrid speak to it.
All right.
The next,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I apologize. Besides the special ed funds, what are the other one-time?
they used, I don't know exactly. I would let Ingrid speak to it. It was, I'll let Ingrid speak to it. It wasn't something on the town end of anything. It was within their specific funds.
They've been invited for the 19th. Okay.
I noted for the select board what some large increases were, or some of the items that were part of the budget. I call them notable. I think select board, I just wanted to point out, because our budget is going up a little less than $8,000, because I've continued to take away where I can in the select board budget, but we're actually moving expenditure that was in the planning department, that was covered by a grant, our Blackboard 311 system. Betsy Fijol in that department, she was very helpful in getting that grant, and we're not getting that grant anymore. We've been charged the last couple of years. So they said, put in the select board office, we're the ones who maintain the 311 system. So we're just moving the expense to our department. I'm trying to negotiate with the group to see if we can get that price down, or maybe do a regional aspect, because, $8,000 for 311 system is whatever. It is what it is. So just want to note, we're not adding $8,000 of things in the select board. Information technology, we have a proposal to do managed detection response. I think like a lot of different communities, we're undergoing a lot of phishing attempts, et cetera. So this is, I think it might be good to have Ton come in and speak to you all, but one of the recommendations on our end is to better combat. We've had some serious cybersecurity issues, and we want to protect the town. We think it's small money considering what the risk is. A lot of other communities are doing it. I would equate it to almost adding an FTE. The layman's term of it is, when we have a cybersecurity attempt, if we contract with a specific company, they're able in the moment to shut down the server and make action directly in that moment, rather than the way that it is now. It's a endpoint system where Ton, our IT director, may get notice an attempt is happening, and then he has to get on site, try to mitigate that. So in these incidents, time really is of the essence. So we think it makes sense to better protect ourselves there, particularly since we've been seeing a lot more attempts with cybersecurity issues. And that's not only Norfolk, but I think that's in a variety of municipalities.
May I ask a question at this point? If you don't know, off the top of your head, I'd love if we could follow up on this. I probably have been asking this question now for like 8 years in a row, but I'll ask again this budget season. Do you know offhand the percentage, not necessarily dollars, but percentage of computing systems? How many are physical, hard systems that we manage within the town, and how many are outsourced or in the cloud?
Yeah, we can get that from Ton for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking is it just triggered that thought. I think you'd still need cybersecurity one way or the other. Like, moving to the cloud does not eliminate or mitigate the entirety of the risk. It will mitigate it somewhat, especially because by virtue of things being in the cloud, it will be more professionally managed, such that we don't have to hire an FTE to do that. But I also think that just our IT budget has been steadily creeping up, as everything else has, right, over time. And I don't think we've done a lot of proactive, transformative activities to better manage that cost. Like, we're continually bringing like in-house systems into the town, which in turn, there's perpetual licensing costs, right?
Yeah,
that
that's
we
a key
see going
point,
up.
the licensing.
But also the this is what triggered the thought that, we've been spending more money to manage those systems than I think we would need to if we took a different approach to this, so.
I mean, we can have the conversation. I think Ton obviously is the policy expert on that, and if the advisor wants to hear from Ton, we can have that discussion.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes, go ahead.
Do the town employees, do we have multi-factor authentication here? Because that,
We have a grant that we received that we're implementing multi-factor authentication now. Yep.
Great.
We have to now
Make
too.
me
It's
change
part of
my
our,
password
it's part of our insurance. It's part of our requirement of our insurance now too, so.
And I'm usually like, I'm lucky I have my phone on me because it wants me to confirm that when I do change my password.
I'll keep moving on. I'll keep moving on. In the budget proposal, there's $28,000 for implementing a body camera system. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. That's something that we're currently collectively bargaining. We've applied for a grant. We applied for a grant last year. We didn't get it. So, that was something that's been important to the board. They want to have that consideration. So that was in the budget as it is now. There's a reduction of a labor and transfer station for DPW. There's been a long vacant position. We haven't been able to hire it, so we're proposing to reduce that position. And we're also formalizing a co-op program that we have. It's been in place for a while. We've had, students help in the water department. This year, I think it's in the transfer station. But we formally implemented this program in our last bout of collective bargaining, so I think it's just formalizing that expense and administration side of things, so.
Is this a stipend for stipends, or is this for something else?
What?
Are you paying the students?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what
the
that's
co-op.
what I meant.
Yep.
It's salary or stipend or?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, currently in this budget, there's a pretty significant decrease in recreation because we're capturing a savings from a potential retirement. And Proto, our recreation director, has let us know that she's plans on retiring. I think in this budget cycle, we're with such a deficit, we're going to actually try to capture those savings. So we're proposing to, adjust for the likelihood that the recreation director is not going to get the salary of a longtime employee here. So we're going to look at that. So we put a couple of, I notify the board of, the various positions that we do have vacant right now. So some options are to selectively choose not to backfill positions because some positions we do think are required. It highlights some of those positions: patrol officer, firefighter, our assistant town administrator, HR director, facilities director is going to be vacant, an assessing technician.
What's going on there? We're not going to have a facilities director?
No, I think those are just positions that are vacant. So when they're vacant, you have to take a look at everything. I have a recommendation at the end, obviously, about what positions not to fill or what to, but I wanted to let the board know what positions are vacant. Then it highlights some opportunities for some further departmental reductions. One item that I didn't mention was the Council on Aging. We have a formula grant that we do have a decent balance in. We generally get about $38,000. So that's one other thing that we're potentially looking at, utilize about $10,000 of that formula grant that Council on Aging receives and using that to cover a couple of some of the salary costs, which you're able to do. Some municipalities use all their grants on salaries. We're proposing using about $10,000 on salaries. So then, some other budget adjustment considerations for the board. The question is how much free cash utilization that we use to balance the budget. I put on there, because I know will engender a nice bit of conversation, because we do have a revenue issue, is, whether we want to revisit the prohibition on retail marijuana. And then the other proposal, and the board did specifically give direction on this, in the climate where the town just voted against the school expansion project, we do not have the capability within our operating budget to fund the Tri-County school budget project. It's $400,000 that add to our deficit. But we do have to pay for it, obviously. And so I asked the board, we got a couple options. We can do the debt exclusion, bring it for a debt exclusion in May. We can use free cash for it, or we can utilize stabilization funds to use it. We're not really I don't see in the near future that we're going for any significant borrowing projects. I'm recommending that we use the stabilization fund, one, because I want people to see how serious this is, but I also don't think it's the right climate to go to the community and ask for a debt exclusion for this. And so the board yesterday did give direction on that they would prefer to use stabilization funds too. They're not going to go for a debt exclusion for the Tri-County building project.
If you had pursued that route, would that be a one-time annual debt exclusion, or would it be for the life of the project?
We would do it for the life of the project.
And it would have some sort of weird flexible cap?
Correct.
All right.
That's what pretty much every community that has approached it that way, they've done it that way to give that flexibility. Because that's the unique thing about that debt. It fluctuates based on your student enrollment too. So it could be higher, it could be lower. A good example is we've got 10 more students this year. You know, if that assessment, if it was X here, and if we had 10, it would be Y the next year, right? So.
But sorry,
Go
Chair,
ahead.
can I ask a question? If we use the stabilization fund, the community does not have a say, that's right, the select board.
No, that's the other key thing. The community does have a say because you have to vote 2/3 at town meeting to utilize it.
Okay.
So that's what's critical there too, because it is giving the community notice how important this is, how serious it is, but you have a direct voice in it. If we don't vote for it, clearly if we don't do it a debt exclusion in May, and we don't vote to utilize the stabilization fund in May, we're going to have to use free cash and cannibalize free cash to fund it, or make significant reductions.
Key aspect of that, though, is that to move funds from stabilization to use them for something like this is a town meeting vote. If we were to do a debt exclusion, that has to go to a ballot, so the wider community is more involved than the 100 people that usually show up at town meeting.
Right,
So,
that's
key
very true.
differentiator.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere in here how much is in the stabilization fund? Where are we at?
Yep, 2.6.
Did you say that earlier? I'm sorry.
I didn't say it there, but we have said it a couple of times, and I think Kevin's been.
And what is the,
free cash?
it's 300, what's the?
$405,000 in some.
This year.
This year.
This year?
Yeah.
Be more next year.
So
because of the changes.
we're proposing just to focus on this for this year, so obviously,
Right.
so it's $405,120.
Okay.
Sorry, can I?
Go
ask a
ahead.
follow-up? If we use the stabilization fund this year, do we have to continue down that path?
That would not be my recommendation to do that. We would be
5 years.
mortgaging a lot of things there. We would be putting a lot of things at risk there. I think this is this year, because as I've said before, I think we have a long-term issue that we have to address. I think this addresses it this year. It doesn't ask your residents for, a debt exclusion or override this year. We can get away with this year and then address the following year.
Rob,
When do you want to talk about this?
what is this?
This
Right now.
All right. So you got how much free cash?
1.7.
1.7. And you only got 2.6 in stabilization,
Yep.
which is it's about 5. You're skidding around 5%. And they like to see it higher than that. So
Love to, yeah.
yeah. Well, so the bond houses like it higher.
They do.
So you're possibly endangering your bond rating at a time when have you gone out for all your debt yet?
That's my argument. We have. We don't really, the school project is clearly not something that's coming up right now. We're not going for any significant debt. And obviously,
You're not going to refi anything. You're not in a cycle where you got to
no.
dump early.
No, we're not planning to do that, so that was key. I wanted to make sure we were doing all of that. But also, just like this past year, we've strategically held the line on that. I've kept the ATA position vacant for a while. I kept the firefighter position for a while. I've asked my departments to be very conservative. We're going to have a decent amount of free cash, I think, for this year as well. And the plan would be, let's utilize it in May, and then in fall town meeting, replenish a bit.
Replenish the stabilization fund.
Yeah.
What did we put in last year? Can you remember right off the top of your head?
200.
2 something. Yeah.
When we had $3 million in free cash last year, right?
3.2.
Like 3.2?
3.2.
Yeah, and we only put 250. We're addicted to free cash because that's our little sneaky under the mattress fund that we can do capital with in the fall.
That's really the
Kind of a dark shadow on it.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
really
it's
the
not like
only
it's done
mechanism.
behind the
It's making
scenes.
my
It's all
point.
voted on at town meeting.
It's not under the mattress, Rob.
That's really the
We do
only
it at a public
mechanism to
meeting,
do
and we
it.
do it at public meetings here, and we do it at public meetings, and we do it at town meeting. Everyone knows what we do. One time I tried to get, when we had huge operating cuts, I said, can't we use free cash? And they were like, no, that's for capital. It was like, it's not, I mean,
And this is capital.
it is.
I'd rather use this and not buy 2 cruisers or whatever else you do with the 400K than get in the savings account and hope that we put some money back in the fall. We haven't been great at that.
We have been since I've been here. I
Well,
just want to say
250
that.
out of 3.2. I'm being a little ridiculous. I admit that.
Yeah.
But,
We're not replenishing what we're taking out every year.
yeah.
At some
We could
point.
consider.
I mean, we haven't touched the stabilization fund.
Yeah, nothing's been taken out.
We haven't utilized the
We haven't used the
stabilization.
stabilization
It
fund in
is
15 years,
comparatively
probably, right?
a modest stabilization fund when compared to other municipalities that take the stabilization fund concept,
What do we have for
aggressive.
capital articles here for the spring? Anything?
No,
Nothing?
no. And that's the other thing. In fall is when we generally do our capital, and we've been about 1.2 to 1.3 in capital. And it's not just
There's no early
vehicles.
warning that it's going to be bigger than that, right? I think the biggest thing last year was obviously the fire truck. There's not another fire truck on the horizon.
Not to that level, no.
No comment.
I just think this is going to be a tough pill to swallow, given that the Norfolk Public School expansion project just went down. And now we're coming back to ask for more money.
We've already voted for this. We have to pay this.
That's the thing.
If
We cannot not pay this.
Hold on, I got a procedural question about this. If we do stabilization and it doesn't get a 2/3 vote at town meeting because people get mad and say we just voted against the school,
Which is a possibility.
Which is the
can
town's
we
right.
then go back, we then have to do what, fall town meeting and pay it with free cash at fall and only need the majority vote? Will Tri-County wait till the fall?
Can we wait that long?
I don't,
Should we just pay it free cash and only need a simple majority than a 2/3?
no. I mean, my recommendation to do stabilization because, I mean, the synopsis and summary of this presentation is, moving forward, the town needs to consider override. It's just pretty simple. And you
An operating override.
An operating override, yes. And that's the key thing right there. So I think that's the focus. I think you're going to hear that from the superintendent as well because they're working on their budget and going to 4%, et cetera. I already see how this is shaping up. And as I said, the revenue, for example, it doesn't even cover our education costs. It requires an override discussion, and that's a difficult discussion, so I'd rather just say, let's be honest about where we're at right now. Not cannibalize free cash, because free cash does give us a little bit of flexibility. Stabilization, as I just said, is 2/3 of vote at town meeting. I think have the serious conversation, prepping that discussion for override at town meeting is important to say why we're using the stabilization fund, because I normally wouldn't recommend that, and I don't think the board would recommend that normally, and then keep that free cash to give us some flexibility. That's my recommendation. It's not, this is what I hope for. It's going to engender a conversation.
Not to be smart ass about it, but what's the other name for a stabilization fund? A rainy day fund.
A rainy day
Is
fund.
this really raining when you've got all that free cash?
Well, my argument would be if we end up doing some of our recommendations, so we're at a $1.3 million deficit at the moment, 1.361. That's also assuming that MPS is going to be at 4%, which clearly we keep hearing from them they are trying to, but that may be difficult for them. I have some recommendations on some further cuts, and if the board decides to do those further cuts, we probably can get our deficit down to $1.1 million, once again, assuming MPS is at 4%. You add $400,000 to that, you're close to the 1.7 in free cash that we have remaining. So all your free cash is gone with that. Or if they don't take any further reductions that I'm proposing, and we're at 1.361, and we add the 405 to that, all your free cash is gone. And that's also not giving flexibility if a decision is made to increase the percentage given to MPS. So Yes, I think it is.
Sorry, if this vote fails, what are the options
You've got
from that
to
point? You said we have
use
to
free
pay.
cash.
But we have to vote on that. Would you be trying to offer an amendment on the floor? A reconsideration with an amendment or something like that?
Yeah.
We could do two articles.
And pass over the free cash article.
If you do stabilization first, if that fails, then you're,
And then,
It's tough. It's like a checking and savings account. We're taking from the savings and the money's sitting in checking.
We have to pay
And more
it
money's
one
going to
way.
checking in the fall.
Right.
It's
that's a really
yeah, that's a great
interesting- That's a
analogy.
great analogy.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
We're taking out of the savings account instead of the checking account, and the checking account gets replenished in the fall.
And the biggest thing with that is like our free cash will be certified after that. Obviously, we won't know what we know what our free cash is at this point, but we're going to have free cash the following year. We won't know at that point because it will be certified later.
You know how I always annoyingly bug you about excise numbers?
Yeah.
I think actually this is the wrong year to pump up excise. I think we're in trouble because, the cliff you fall off with a 3-year-old car.
Yeah.
And if certain things persist, nobody's buying a car this year.
Yep. But believe me, there's pressure on that to look at revenue and tick it up even further. That's just the tough part. That's just a tough situation.
When you say things persist, you mean outside of town government?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, wait a minute. All right.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, where are we here?
Yeah.
Sorry, before we move off this
Yeah,
slide.
sure.
The question on the retail marijuana
Yep.
item, just curious, did this idea come from the select board?
Nope.
Or is this a proposition that we're making to the select board for consideration?
No, I think in my conversations with the select board and obviously with the advisory committee, the question is it truly rainy day? It's not, oh my God, the walls are falling down, we're broke. But I think we have a revenue issue, and that I will hopefully address. So you see, with what our percentage growth is in our budget, you have to look at everything. And if you want to try to mitigate the costs on taxpayers and not have an override, you have to find other mechanisms to increase revenue. But you also have to make these decisions. If you don't want to do that, then you've got to pursue an override. So at least think putting all the options on the table is important to have a conversation.
Understood. I was just
not
curious where
advocating.
this
Yeah, the
stemmed
board is not advocating it. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying, put all the options on the table, have a transparent discussion, and decide what you want to do.
Has there been a potential business partner that has expressed interest in something like this? Maybe is an okay answer.
Maybe. I'm not trying to hide anything there, but potentially could be. But it's all around the community. I think that's more the question. It's all around the
Are we
community.
the only community that has a prohibition?
No.
In the, like,
I think surrounding us, I don't know. There's quite a few all around.
yeah, I've seen a few of them, I just don't.
Plainville, Foxborough, I guess two of them.
They're everywhere.
All right.
So,
Millis has one.
Oh, Millis has one.
But, I
Plainville
mean,
has
there's
one.
also, there's this whole, relative to the industry, there's this whole saturation argument going on.
that's the next thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
2017, you're ahead of the game a little bit.
Correct. Yeah.
Today, you're a little bit behind the 8 ball.
Correct.
But if people in town want it, they're going somewhere else to buy it.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody wants to open that store here.
Yeah.
Trying to find mechanisms to increase revenue and not just look to raise taxes on people. We understand, like I said, the climate, a lot of people are aging in place, fixed incomes. You've got to look at all alternatives. I think it's important to have that conversation.
Bake sales are really good.
It's a good
Trying to
segue,
lighten the
Dave.
mood here a little bit.
So, yeah. So, and the next slide is just highlight some of the positions that we've continued to hold, and, from our reductions from the previous budget. But most importantly, I highlight, for example, the question is our budget growing exponentially larger or smaller? The areas where I can control in terms of town budget, not fixed costs, education, or, debt, benefits, et cetera. We have 2.65% growth. That's including COLAs, everything. I think that's fairly conservative.
Yeah.
And yet, we're still in the budget deficit that we have. So I want to point that out. And that isn't accounting for any free cash. That's 2.65 growth over last year, right? The next slide just highlights what I've kind of already said. It gives you, I already gave this preview. I think this isn't feasible moving forward. We had this conversation last year. I said we probably could get through this year, that last year and this next year. We can do it, just being honest. But moving forward, we can't without pretty significant reductions on all sides of the table because free cash will be utilized pretty heavily in this budget and will be required moving forward, because when you use one-time sources of funds for recurring expenses, it only gets larger and the gap grows larger the following years, and that's exactly what's happening now. I highlight how much free cash we have there on that slide, and then the final slide has some recommendations for the board. They didn't make any decisions regarding that. We did have some of our, police and fire there, but it recommends freezing 2 of the positions that were vacant. A police patrol officer, a firefighter, paramedic. It also proposes capturing potential salary savings with Chief Hines. He's notified me that he's retiring in September, so we're proposing that. They propose removing the funding for body cameras and reapplying for that grant. We've been fairly good with grants, and I propose, hey, let's get a consultant to make us tighten up the application and try for the grant before we fund it. Utilize the COA grant funds. And so if they did some portion of that would reduce our deficit about 1.37 to 1.13 about. And then it just highlights how we've closed our gap. We started at 1.8 and we're down to 1.3. It included $233,000 in new revenue and then $458,000 in town departmental expenses, which obviously will go further if they do take these recommendations. It'll be about $600,000 plus in town departmental expenses being reduced.
Okay.
May I ask?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Just a point of information, the historical budget slide,
Yeah.
for me, I won't speak for anyone else, but it would be really helpful if there was another column on here to see the population increase over this period of time. So at least we can apply normalization. We can see what percentage our expenses are increasing, but spread over on what larger percent of taxpayers. So if that information is easy, like I don't want to give anyone an assignment, but if we have easy accessibility to that would be helpful, because this is, when people look at this, it's scary. I'm not saying it's not growing like crazy. I mean, but when people look at this without benchmarking it against population growth, I feel like this could be a lot more scary than reality is. Because if the population of the town has grown 25% in this period of time, obviously that increase is spread over a larger amount of people. So I think, again, without knowing what those numbers are, I think having that, again, so we could normalize the budget against a standard taxpayer, so to speak, would be very helpful.
That's good feedback. Todd puts this slide together. I'm sure we could speak with Carol and get that data and just add another column to it. So I'll speak with Todd about it. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any? I have a sort of a general comment about what you were just talking about relative to future problems and the concept of needing to go for an override, an operating override. Why aren't we squeezing it tight this year to force that vote? Because you're going to have to squeeze it tight one year. You're going to have to scare people. Scare people's not the right word, but they need to understand what happens if we don't. I mean, by covering up with free cash and acknowledging that whether it's under my mattress or done at town meeting, you're pushing that hard choice off. If you said we could do this without using free cash, but it's going to cost this much, I would like to know what that number is. How many employees at the schools, how many town employees, how many police and fire, because right now, we don't know that because we haven't done that analysis. It would be really interesting to find out if we did not apply $1.2 million worth of free cash to this budget, what it's going to mean. I'd like to know that.
No, it's a fair conversation to
Yeah. And I think that people should be aware of that, so that when we come back next year and say we're not going to use free cash this year, and it's going to cost 10 teachers and 5 firefighters and cops and 2/3 of or a third of the town hall staff, then we know that.
I mean, the problem is not the problem, but 1.2 million is not a lot of people. It's not going to give the dramatic thing that you're thinking.
It's going to be more dramatic than,
Actually, I think it'll be more dramatic than people
if you
think.
just tell the schools that they're taking 50% of that, that's 5 or 6 teachers.
Yeah.
Right.
And 5 or 6 teachers scares everyone in the schools.
Do we need, sorry.
And what?
Do we need to look at how many that's already come down by to be able to?
Right, and well, it means not backfilling the positions they haven't backfilled.
Yeah.
It means all the held positions are never getting filled, plus, and those numbers need to be presented together. That we're already down what the ideal departments should look like. I'm not saying that's the correct number, but it's the ideal number for the department heads. And if you say, oh, by the way, not only you're not getting any increases, but you're going to lose 2 people or 5 students or 5 teachers or whatever it might be, 2 cops, then maybe it's, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Maybe it's, the free cash does paper over the problem. We do it, I know it's happening, everyone knows it's happening, but it is paper. I think you used the word paper over or something along those lines, but it's addressing the problem in the short term, and you acknowledge tonight that we can't keep doing that.
Yep.
But I'm pushing for an earlier denouement on this than later. Yes.
So that's why we're appointed by the moderator, not the selectmen. So you're raising a political issue, right? Because it's a political question for the selectmen. Is this year select board?
Sorry, I had to do that.
You're right. The select board is this year where everything outside the borders of this town, and I'll say this state, is just bonkers, right? And there's uncertainty galore, and the Atlanta Fed says, oh, you're going to be in contraction this year. Is this year the year to have the shootout the OK Corral? Is it, let's get through this, hope to God something normalizes, and we can come back to the town next year with the, okay, folks, now here's but that's a political, not
Well, and if we go into a recession, a lot of our revenues are going to be down.
well, it's
all
actually
across
not
the-
as bad.
The good thing, the good and bad
Local
thing
revenues,
is,
not,
Just local receipts, not tax revenue.
right. Well, a lot of receipts will be down, Rob. You knew where I was going with that.
I would say the good and bad thing for a community like Norfolk is we don't have a lot of hotel or, food, et cetera. So recession hits, I mean, our largest tax base is residential. We're realizing real estate taxes. So for some communities that rely on a lot of those local receipts, they're definitely more impacted than Norfolk would be. It will take a hit like everyone else, but it's not to the same extent as a lot of other communities that rely on local receipts for a bigger part of their budget.
But I do think it's important to lay out the scenario for transparency purposes, for people to see what the true impact is of of the town not filling these positions. We're going to see a reduction in 5 staff at the schools, and that's best case scenario. So I think, to the chair's point, it's helpful for the town to see all of that. And I agree that we should rip the Band-Aid off. I mean, this problem is not going away. And people are getting more and more upset about the situation. So I just think that transparency is key. Obviously, that's not my call to make, but...
You and I had a conversation about Southwood, or whatever number Dedham Street that is.
111 Dedham.
Thank you, 111 Dedham. I mean, any real impact of that is 3 or 4 years out.
3-4 years away.
And it's $1 million or $1.2 million or whatever they said it was.
$1 million.
Town meeting. Yeah. That's 3 or 4 years out. And we will have no free cash left by then. If we're waiting on that, it's...
I think a lot of people are waiting on that, and that's not even going to be
well-
enough, right, by then, so.
No, because this will continue to grow upon itself anyway there, so. I want to make sure we're clear and clarifying, we're obviously very early still in the budget process, right? This isn't a finished product. This is my first iteration of this before the board, so they have to take some time to think about it as well, right? How they want to approach it. As I said, the only thing that they did sort of give clarity and, direction on was Tri-County. Because one thing that we looked at too is our fire station building project is, when it's all said and done, there is going to be some savings there, significant savings. So I knew what the answer was, but look, we're going to try and look at everything. So we wanted to see if we could utilize any of those savings to be appropriate to Tri-County, because if it was a town project, we absolutely could. It's a like for like, it's a construction project. But because it is not directly a town project, it is the Voc Tech project, we can't use those savings for it. So we'll pay down the debt for that. But the only clarification they gave was that we're not going to go for a debt exclusion. But they still have a lot of time. They've got to think through if they want further reductions, what reductions look like, free cash. There's a variety of decisions still made, so I don't want to make it seem like there isn't transparency there. They haven't had an opportunity to dive into this. They had the first meeting yesterday regarding the budget. So, I do think what you all said, it's something that I've talked with them, and I think more than likely that's probably an approach that they do want to take. They want to be transparent, but hey, this is what it looks like. We understand the climate. Maybe we navigate this year and figure out how we approach it the following year, collectively, right?
I just think, again, going back to, we're asking MPS to make more reductions in their budget to the tune of roughly $400,000 or whatever that number is, and then we're going to give that $400,000 to Tri-County. Obviously, we have to pay it, but it's just going to be, I foresee it to be something that the residents are going to take issue with, potentially, given that the expansion project just went down as well. So just taking all of that into consideration, something for the board to consider as they're making the decision on how to proceed.
We got to hear back from MPS too. We haven't heard from them. That's the information we have, just so that's lied. They have to do their budget process.
All right, anticlimactically, if this is the last question, it's a dumb one. The 1.1 million deficit, does that include the 400,000?
No.
Okay, so it's really 1.5.
Yes, if they take those recommendations that I put out there, it would drop down from the 1.361 to 1.1. And yeah, it would, if you add the 4 to that, it's like 1.5, yeah.
Does anyone else have anything else? Thank you.
You're welcome. Look forward to this budget.
We'll watch that presentation if they watch this meeting, if the board watches this meeting.
Okay.
Well, sorry.
Does the board have a designee to the advisory committee?
It does. I think it's Anita. So, and Anita's been in tune with this. She does, actually, I was going to say that's fair, because I do know Anita talks to me about advisory meetings afterwards, so she's clearly watching and being engaged.
Only good things, right?
Only great things, David. You guys all set with me?
Yes.
All right.
Thanks.
I'll see you guys later. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, couple items before, we have minutes, right? Or did we get minutes from? Yes, we did. Yeah, all right. Sorry, I realized something else that on minutes with Carol today. She yelled at me about something else. But
Okay.
You need to email them to her before you go down and sign them, so she knows they're coming.
Yes, I know.
Okay,
There was a
all right.
question that we had to.
And the other ones that Ken did, I didn't email them, and neither did Melissa, so she was wondering where they were. It's not your fault. You're not.
Which ones that I did?
The ones that we did 2 meetings ago.
But I thought that vote was no good because it wasn't a roll call vote.
Well, you weren't here last
guys redid it
meeting.
last week.
We didn't redo it last week. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I'll take care of it. It's not your fault. Next week is CPC. I believe that the consultant for the lake project will be participating via Zoom. We've been trying to talk to him for a couple years now. I also did confirm with the citizen petition lead that he will be appearing before us next week as well. So.
12th?
The 12th, yes.
And it's the same citizen for both.
Yes, yeah. And last formal item of business is minutes from the,
Move to approve the minutes.
she needs to do it as clerk.
Yeah.
I'll second.
We have one edit to those minutes that
Okay.
needs to be made, just a name. Joyce was not listed on the first section, but was listed as present.
Okay.
So we'll make that edit, but otherwise, I make a motion to approve those minutes with that edit.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay. We are concluded here tonight. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.